Greetings everyone, and welcome to my first ever Divya Henna video venture. This is Prashanta of Divya Henna, and I am excited to start doing a series of video tutorials to help budding henna artists or even professionals or just hobbyists, anybody that just has a passion for henna and wants to learn a little bit more about the craft and some of the techniques. I'm here to help. So to start off with, I figured a good topic that would be good as a starting point is talking about practice. Practice is something that we all hear that expression, practice makes perfect, or perfect practice makes perfect something. I don't even know that expression, but the point is that in order to get good at something, I think there's been studies done that they say in order to really become proficient at any type of skill or knowledge or expertise that you have to practice for a minimum of 10,000 hours. So one of the pieces of advice that my henna mentor, Nita Sharma of Mehndi Designer, she gave me this piece of advice when I was first starting out. She said, practice every day. I don't always practice every day. Sometimes I fall short, but I definitely try to practice whenever possible. I like to doodle a lot. So even if you're not practicing with a henna cone, practicing with something, a pen, colored pencil, or even we'll talk about some other things you can practice with a little bit later on. But the important thing is just start doodling, start looking at henna, start observing things about design elements, and start looking at things that you like about the henna designs and things that don't really appeal to you. And making a note of that is going to help you develop your own aesthetic as you start practicing. Sorry for the wobble. I got my dogs here with me and they're kind of like jumping on and off the couch and wandering around as I'm talking. So, to start off with, I wanted to talk about materials that you can use to practice. One of the things that a lot of people you'll notice have used lately are these acrylic hands. You can get them all over the place. Henna Supply companies. Here's a clear acrylic one. It has a more of a kind of a rough surface, as opposed to this one has a very slick, shiny surface. You can get henna, you can get them shaped like feet. You can get boards. Here's a clear one. There's a white one underneath. I'm a little bit of a maverick. I don't like using acrylic. I feel like when you use the acrylic, here's a little demonstration. This is a henna cone, so you can take a look. I feel like the henna, I have trouble getting it to flow consistently and evenly on the acrylic. I just don't like the way the henna sticks. I feel like it's just not optimal. It frustrates me, and I don't like the cleanup process. I mean, you could, just scrape it all off when it's dry with a credit card, or you could wash it off. I don't like being bothered with that. Like, essentially, I'm kind of a lazy person, so I don't like additional steps. I don't like additional cleanup. I like to avoid things that create extra work for me. So what do I use? I actually just use paper towels. I know it sounds a little crazy. It's something I've been doing for years and years and years, and people always say, what are you doing? Why are you wasting it on a paper towel? I just like the way, or a napkin, either one. I just like the way the henna is picked up by the paper towel or the napkin. And then I also usually keep a little piece in my opposite hand so that I can wipe the tip of the cone really easily as I'm working. Another cool tip I can offer is using these plastic page protectors. And that way you can put whatever you want inside and trace designs and help build muscle memory. So it's a good thing to do if there's a specific type of shape that you're trying to learn, or if there's a specific artist that you like their style and you want to get a little bit more insight into how they create the designs, this is a nice technique to use. And it's also, you can either throw it out or you can wash it off when you're done and reuse it. You can keep putting whatever things you want in there. Excuse my dog pitter-pattering in the background. He wants to join in the fun. And the other trick I have for you is to, if you don't have access to fresh henna paste, you can put lotion in a henna cone like I've done here. And then you can use that. And it's also good like to practice lotion henna on people's skin. So if you're fortunate enough to get someone to volunteer to let you practice on them, you don't have to feel as much pressure. There's not as big of a commitment. This is actually very, very thin henna paste, lotion. So you might want to experiment with different lotion consistencies as well. And this helps you build muscle memory. You can just trace shapes over and over again. You can learn about how designs are constructed. This is nice lotion. It smells like patchouli. I know patchouli is kind of like one of those love it or hate it things. It's very polarizing, kind of like cilantro. I love cilantro and patchouli. You can comment in the comment section what your opinions about that topic are. I know people have very strong opinions about it, but in any event, you can pick any scent of lotion you like. It's another little perk. You can smell like roses or whatever. And yeah, like I said, it's less of a commitment. You don't have to worry as much about, oh, what if I screw up this design, or my hands are shaky, or what if I'm not feeling steady about this. You can practice without as much of a commitment. You don't have to worry about ruining something. So we talked a little bit about some different materials that you can use to practice. Another one that I thought of that I didn't mention earlier is you can use watercolor paper, which is designed for more wet materials to sit on top of the surface rather than get absorbed into the paper. So I'll demonstrate that a little bit here. This is what I do is if I've pre-filled my henna cones, and we're going to talk about how to make your own cones, how to make your own paste, how to fill your cones. I'm going to have a whole series of different topics. So when I've pre-filled my cones, I like to keep a little glass bead needle in the tip just to keep it fresh so it doesn't dry out and clog up. And then when I start practicing, I do basically drills. I start out with just some lines. So depending upon the consistency of your paste, you may want to practice with draping, which is essentially lifting your cone some distance away from the paper or the surface, whatever you happen to be hennaing, and letting the material just passively fall down onto the material. There are certain pastes and certain consistencies that work well with draping, and there are certain types of henna that do not work so well. They tend to be creamier. The stickier pastes, such as the Rajasthani pastes, tend to be a little bit easier for draping. I know quite a few people that like to combine different henna powders, and then that way you can play around with the consistency a little bit. And, you know, depending on what type of work you want to do, that's gonna have a bearing on what type of consistency paste you want. If you're going to be doing a lot of geometric shapes with lots of straight lines, you might want something that drapes really easily, such as Moroccan henna. You sometimes see old school Moroccan henna artists using a syringe, and they'll just kind of hold it like this and then just drape the syringe across to make their straight lines. I don't do a whole lot of Moroccan style henna. There are definitely many artists that are really amazing that you should check out if you're interested in doing Moroccan style henna. I tend to do a lot of Indian style themes and designs, but nowadays everything is fusion. You know, people are combining elements that they see on the internet from various types of styles and cultures and creating brand new types of designs, which I think is completely awesome. I love creation. I love creating new things. I think when you're starting out, it's a good idea to copy other people's designs and motifs just to get the hang of it and see, what methods and techniques work well. But over time, I think it's a great idea to start combining elements that you like and forming your own artistic design aesthetic and forming your own voice as an artist. So this is like whenever I start practicing henna, I always start with straight lines, as I mentioned. And that helps me test the consistency of the paste. Even if you consistently mix your paste with the same ingredients every time, there's going to be variations in how it flows just because of different things like the ambient temperature, the humidity, whether or not you've put sugar into your paste, because that's a humectant, it draws moisture out of the air. So there's a lot of different things that are going to affect the way your henna is flowing from day to day and also from hour to hour. You can start an appointment and your henna is flowing one way, and then by the end of the appointment, it feels like a different paste. And that's a phenomenon that I've discussed with other artists that it seems to be a common finding, that you'll start your appointment, you're like, this is dream paste, it's amazing, it's flowing so well. And then at the end, you're like, oh, it's a little sticky, it's just not flowing the way I like it to. So I mentioned, starting with some lines. And then the second thing I always start with are just doing a bunch of humps or frills, some people call them. You can do whatever size and height you want when you're doing these humps, but a piece of advice is just try your best to try to get them generally about the same size. So you want to have like an imaginary line that they're all kind of meeting that line. It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, this is just practice and we're just warming up. Some people like to do some warm-up exercises with their hands, or you can just kind of like, move your wrists around in some flowy motions just to get the blood flowing. Sometimes when my hands are particularly cold, it doesn't happen to me so much anymore now that I live in California, but when I used to live in New York, I would have a problem with my hands being super, super cold. And one of the tips that my old piano teacher gave me is just go to a sink and run your hands under some hot water for a minute or two. And that warms them up, gets the blood flowing, and it just helps you not feel so stiff while you're working. So there's different ways you can do lines. One of the things I always recommend practicing is varying the thickness of your lines. So start off with either draping or just closely touching the paper with thin lines. And then practice going a little closer to the paper and then squeezing, putting a little more pressure on the cone to get thicker lines. And practice making your lines thicker just by the use of the pressure alone and how fast you're moving your cone. If you're moving your cone really quickly, obviously you're not going to be able to achieve the same thickness. So you kind of have to slow down a little bit and squeeze the pressure a little harder as you're going along to get thicker lines. But another trick that a lot of artists use is to drape two thin lines and then fill them in. So you can drape two thin lines, and some people like to let those dry for about 30 seconds or however long. You can go to a different element of your design and come back to it. And then when you're ready, you just fill those in. And that creates nice, neat edges to your lines. And you can take time with that and really make them super clean looking. So, and that's something that a lot of artists really strive for, is to get a really clean look to your work. It makes your work stand out. It makes you, it's what separates a professional artist, in my opinion, from an amateur, from someone who's just starting out or someone who's a hobbyist. It's not to say that someone who's just starting out, their work is bad or their work is not worthy of attention or adoration. But one of the things that makes work look a little more polished and professional and deliberate is seeing clean lines, consistency in the shape and the size of the different elements. So those are things to keep in mind when you're practicing, is to practice making your lines consistent in thickness, making your your shapes such as humps or swirls, consistent in size. One of the tips I recommend for people sometimes is to use graph paper when you're starting out. So like here's some graph paper. I haven't taken the plastic off because, as I mentioned before, you can use plastic on top of the paper. But say I want to do some swirls and I want to make them the same size. I might start off with just, 4 boxes and make a swirl inside. And then go next door and then take the next 4 squares and try to make a circle or a swirl. And then as I get more confident, I might speed up just a little bit as I'm going. I am someone, my philosophy is always take your time. I don't like to ever rush anything, especially art. I feel like it's something that you develop at your own speed. If you naturally start to get faster at something, awesome, that's great. But I don't feel like it's ever something, I don't feel like there's ever a need to rush yourself, especially when you're first starting out and you're learning something. I think you got to be slow, you got to be meticulous. If you rush something, it's hard to slow yourself down and learn how to do it neatly and carefully. If you start off carefully and neatly and deliberately, it's easier to develop speed as you get more consistent and more confident in what you're doing. So, and when I'm doing something like a warm-up exercise, I don't beat myself up if things don't look exactly the same, if things don't match exactly. This is why I'm practicing, so that I can develop that muscle memory and get a little bit better, hopefully, as I progress with keeping things consistent. Don't beat yourself up. Don't start with a defeatist attitude, because then you're going to get frustrated and then you're not going to want to practice and you're not going to want to continue. You're going to give up easily. You're going to see other people's work that looks so much better than yours. And you're going to go, oh, I don't think that's for me. I don't have that natural talent. You don't need natural talent. Just practice every day and you're going to see tremendous improvement. Don't ever compare yourself to someone else. Just compare yourself to you and always strive to get better at what you do every single day. And if you take a look back at what you've done last month or last couple months or last year, you're going to be amazed at what you've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time. It doesn't seem like it at the time, but the longer you do it, the more you realize that like time just flies like that and you're getting good. So, and there's so many wonderful henna artists. There's communities of henna artists on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, that you can ask them questions and they'll be happy to tell you how they do things or what their approaches are, give you little tips and tricks about what things they've learned and what they've gleaned over their years of practice. So take advantage of that. We live in the most amazing time of sharing of information. So it's a really great time. And I very strongly encourage people, if possible, I know it's not possible for everybody, but if at all possible, I would say try to attend some henna conferences in your area or even far away from you if you can afford the luxury, because you want to be exposed to new ideas, new teachers, new methods, new tips and tricks, new design sensibilities. There's trends in different areas of the world that it's so amazing to have that exposure and be able to be exposed to all these different types of art from all around the world. It's very inspiring. Oh, and one thing I also wanted to mention about swirls, I'm going to go back to my watercolor paper. One thing I wanted to mention about swirls is it's a good idea to practice both directions and see which one you like better, and also practice starting on the outside and gradually working your way inwards with the spiral. And then try one where you're starting with the spiral in the center and working your way outwards, and see which one is easier for you and which one works better for you. I used to try to start inside and work my way out, but I found that it was harder for me. My spirals were not coming out as consistent. It was harder for me to make them the same size and shape. It just felt more awkward with my hand. So I started doing my spirals going outside inward, and I feel like I can work a little bit more confidently, a little more assuredly, a little more consistently when I do that. Another thing you can try is draping spirals. So you can lift off the paper and drape. And this is a great exercise for control when it comes to draping, because it's a lot harder, as you can see right there, it's a lot harder to drape in a circular motion, I think, than in a straight line. But you might find that you really love it. So it's great to experiment and see what types of methods work better for you. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Some people are really, they're just the way their hands are and the way they feel comfortable holding the cone is different. The speed they like to work in, the consistency of the paste, there's no one-size-fits-all, which is why I very, very strongly encourage people to learn how to make your own paste, because when you can make your own paste, you get to control the consistency. And you also know what you've put in it, which is great, because then you can confidently tell any client or any person that you're applying it to their skin what's in that paste. So that way, if they have any allergies or if they have any issues, you can narrow down like what's causing the problem. When you use stuff that's bought in the stores, unfortunately, because fresh henna has such a short shelf life, you're playing roulette. You don't know what's in it. There's not a whole lot of industry regulation, so they can say what they want on the labels. There's not really a lot of people inspecting and backing up the claims, and you could wind up potentially putting something harmful on somebody's skin. And of course, we want to avoid that. Another thing I forgot to mention is that it's a good idea when you're working, whether it's practice or whether it's working with a client, keep a little paper towel next to you that you can wipe the tip off. A clean tip to your henna cone is going to help you have cleaner work and cleaner lines. If you have a lot of globs of goo on the end of your cone, it's going to make it harder to work neatly. So those are a couple different things you can try. You saw I did these humps a little bit. Humps is something that you can do in any size, so sometimes, and thickness. So sometimes you'll see these tall, thin humps. Sometimes you'll see like short, fat ones that are a little wider stance from each other. And again, I'm using that same principle of squeezing my cone, a little bit more pressure to get those thicker lines. Or you could do the same thing by outlining the shapes. And then choosing whether or not you want to let it dry for a little bit of time, and then filling those shapes in. So you can see there's two different types of effects that are achieved by whether or not you choose to just squeeze the paste directly in a slower fashion, making a thicker line, or creating an outline and then filling that in. You can do the same thing with all sorts of shapes. A lot of people have trouble making teardrop shapes. You can do teardrop shapes the same way. You can either squeeze and then gradually let up as you drag. You can squeeze, gradually let up as you drag in whatever direction you're going. Squeeze and gradually let up as you drag. Or you could outline a shape and fill it in. And I would suggest practicing both, because you want to become proficient at different methods, because there's different times that you want to use different tools depending on the effect that you're trying to go for. And you also want to find out what your preferences are. My preferences might be totally different than someone else's. I might like to work really slowly and meticulously, and some people might not care as much about making each individual line as clean as they do the overall impact of the design, and that's totally cool too. That's a design preference, that's a design choice, it's a stylistic preference. And the best way to figure it out is to become a collector of ideas. Collect different methods and techniques and styles. Look at different things. Never plagiarize. Don't just completely copy someone else's design unless you're planning on giving them credit. And by giving credit, I don't mean saying inspired by, if you're plagiarizing every line for line of a design. That's not being inspired. Being inspired is finding things you like and then making them somehow your own, putting your own voice into the mix. And I tend to tell a lot of my clients that, because a lot of times I'll get approached, there'll be some trendy design that's going around viral on the internet, and people will show me those designs and say, this is what I want. And I tell people I don't do that. I won't copy someone else's design, because you wouldn't want to show up to a party or a wedding wearing the same outfit as everyone else. Why would you want to have the same henna? Get your own cool, original, unique henna that no one else has. Why not you be the trendsetter instead of following the trend, you know? I don't know. That's my personal philosophy. The only time I make an exception to that is if somebody has asked me to either cover for them, if, you know, maybe they're sick and they have someone book them. A bride, for instance, has booked an artist, and their heart's set on having that artist, and someone has entrusted me to cover for them in an emergency situation. I'll make an exception there, and I'll try to, as close as possible, mimic that artist's style. But as my friend Nita Sharma says a lot, when you try to copy another artist's style, it's almost like trying to copy someone's handwriting, because you're not going to be able to do it as confidently or as quickly. It's never going to look quite as good. And I don't want to start off an appointment with those false expectations that someone's expecting one thing and I can't really deliver. I want to find a client that likes my style of work and is happy to work with me. So it's good to make that clear when you're working with clients that, you know, I have my own style. This is how I work. And if you like it, great, you know, and you can certainly show me things that inspire you. I love looking at other pieces that an artist has created that, you know, that this client likes. So that way I get an idea and a feel for their personal aesthetic, what things they enjoy looking at and what things they don't like looking at. And in that case, I feel like I can create something inspired by what they like, but that has my own unique elements and voice to it, which is my favorite way to work. And again, you know, I'm just talking about my own particular preferences. There's tons of people that like to copy other artists' designs, and that's totally cool as long as you're giving them proper credit. And that's a good way to start out when you're first learning. So it's totally fine to copy other artists' designs if that's what you like to do. And also when you're first starting out, it's a good way to learn. Mimic other people, mimic the pros, find out what techniques they use, find out what stylistic design elements they use a lot, what motifs they tend to use, and copy them, because that's a good way to learn. It's a good way to build your muscle memory. But when you start venturing out on your own and getting your own clients, I really recommend working on developing your own style, getting creative. Don't rely on always having to copy someone else's work, because you'll never really create your own voice. And that's kind of what art is about. We're not just technicians here, we're creators. We're innovators. We're creating art. We're creating something new. And if you don't think of yourself that way, your clients won't either. You know, if you just think of yourself as like a technician, like I just squeeze goo on someone's hand, then they're going to think of you that way too. And then they're going to want to know why you want to charge them for it. They're going to be like, oh, anyone in my family can do that. My friends can do that. So you want to develop something that's a unique thing that you do, that they're going to be paying you because it's special. Not everybody can do it. Or not everyone can do it the way you do it. It sets you apart. So anyway, I think that's a good stopping point for our first lesson. Again, practice every day. Practice as much as possible. It doesn't have to be with henna. It can be with lotion. It can be with pens. It could be with gel pens on dark paper, which is really cool effect. And it makes it fun to see the design emerge. You can practice with pretty much anything, you know, any material you can practice. Some people like to do wood burning on like picture frames or other wood boxes and things like that. But the point is just get out there and practice. Don't be intimidated. Don't keep comparing yourself to other people. You're going to get better every single day. And as long as you're improving and moving in the right direction, don't worry about what anyone else is doing. So that's my message for today. I hope you liked this first venture into doing some instructional and tutorial videos. Please, in the comments, comment, like my video, subscribe. I like to do an elaborate series of different topics. So please let me know what topics you would like me to cover. If you have any suggestions for me about how you would like me to present the material that would make it easier for you to follow, I'm very open to that. So please keep in touch with me and let me know what you think. And hit that little bell so that you get alerts when I put up new videos. And thank you very much. And we'll see you soon.